Okay, so today we have Heiner with us. Heiner is the co-founder and CEO of Acuritz, and I will briefly hand over to Heiner, so he will also introduce himself and what Acuritz does, and then we will shortly begin with our questions. So Heiner, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for giving us the time. And I have had a very brief pleasure of working with you before, I think, a couple of years. And when we thought about starting some podcasts like this to kind of get out the message, and because a lot of people are in my position, so they have moved to the industry from academia, they're doing well, but now they feel somewhere stuck. So how do I move on to the next step? And since you are somebody who I have also worked with, and you have achieved a lot from going from academia to industry, and then also doing your own startup. And so far, I think it's going very well. We will get to Acuritz in a while, but maybe you can introduce yourself with a couple of lines.
Yeah, thank you very much, Harsh, for giving me the opportunity to exchange with you also and reflect a little bit.
Yeah.
Great to be here with you. And actually, I think the first step I made towards industry was already directly after my studies, because my background is in pure mathematics and graph theory, but that was more like proving theorems. And I knew that I will not earn much money with that going forward. And I'm also not the hero professor who has a brilliant academic career in front of him. So I thought, let's try something pragmatic.
Right.
Using the graphs, I liked always the graphs, but I wanted to do something pragmatic. And then there was this industry PhD position with University in Augsburg and Siemens Corporate Technology in Munich. And that gave me an opportunity to transition from pure mathematics into computer science and did the PhD then there already with Siemens. And then afterwards, I switched to more the pharmaceutical industry, which turned out to be a good move, because there's a lot of data to be improved in that industry, and you have less issues than with direct patient data. Like in healthcare with Siemens, you always had to deal with data privacy topics, and it's always very difficult. And in pharmaceutical, especially in R&D, of course, there are a lot of data protection measures, but it's not about data privacy. It's more about confidentiality of data, of course, because you're dealing with sensitive data. But it proved to be a really good industry to apply semantics in.
No, graph data is kind of very intuitive when it comes to dealing applications that are kind of networks. So you have the medical information, you have also a lot of banking sector. So I think a lot of graph is like the first love of a lot of domains right now. And of course, with the whole LLMs and AI and also knowledge graph, which we will shortly talk. I think we already started upon a few of my questions, which were like what got you interested in pure mathematics at the time, and then like how was that? What I think you partly also answered it, like you moved to life sciences and your work at Siemens. So I think, if I'm not wrong, your PhD thesis was somewhat related to radiology or something like that. So what got you from going into maths, then into Siemens with radiology and a thesis in that, and then what got you attracted to being, then I think you joined Ostos also, right? Like as a consultant and then,
Yeah, so actually, it's very difficult, or was difficult for me in the after school, didn't know what to do. And I worked actually in the home for elderly people during my civil service time. And after that, I thought the best thing to do is study medicine. And I actually even applied for medicine to start this, but I didn't get a place. So then I get to my fallback where I was good in school, and so I choose mathematics as a subject. And then somehow also through friends and other colleagues, they said graph theory is interesting. I never even have heard before then about this topic, and I thought charts, but then I thought, okay, graph theory is about connections and how networks are organized. And this proved quite interesting, but I wanted to get to something that has more, let's say, impact in the daily life. So that's how the opportunity in Siemens came about, is applying graph to organizing medical information. In this case, yes, that was radiology.
Right.
All kinds of findings people, the doctors observe in images, how to structure that. And so there already data standardization was an initiating theme. And how we can use ontologies and semantics for this combination of the contextual knowledge that the doctors have about anatomy, symptoms, disease relations, and so on. And then the data side, so the actual findings in patients, and how you can combine that to make for example, diagnosis or treatments more intelligent.
Right. And your PhD was like you were partly affiliated with the university. So was it like a dual study kind of thing where you were doing also the thesis with Siemens, like in application, and then working also with the university for the degree? Or?
Yeah, so of course you need to be enrolled in a university, and also then only through that you can get a PhD. And that proved to be a quite good collaboration with Bernhard Bauer from University in Augsburg, who worked on methodologies for distributed systems. And so this is still a theme, and also in my work now, where we need to deal with a lot of different organizations all managing their data, and we're trying to bring things together with semantics and shared contextual information.
Right. I think that's a very natural overlap that I also had, like with respect to working on projects during my PhD, and that also led me to basically work on graphs. I think graphs is like the sweetheart child of all applications now, because I mean before it was all fine with relational databases, since you had all these very highly specified systems with very concrete schema, and you know, like it was very predictable in the sense like what the structure that the data needs to be stored in. But with the whole blast of enormous amounts of data throughout the landscape now, there is nothing like a fixed schema, right? The data itself is evolving as and when with the applications. You now have like sensors, and they are pumping in data. You are getting data from different sources. Of course, with life sciences and like medical data, you also need to anonymize a lot of stuff. And there's like clinical trials. So yeah, absolutely. Graphs are also very close to my heart. And yeah, I mean, then I think it makes sense that you moved from after finishing your PhD, you moved to work in the industry with the life sciences. But then what made you choose consulting? Like, why not go as some other, I don't know, like an expert developer or engineer, and then like why consulting?
So this, I must say, was a IT consulting firm. So we were helping large pharmaceutical or agrochemical companies how they can organize and structure their data, especially reference or master data, better, so that they can standardize their information about what they have in the different systems on research or toxicology and so on, how we can better connect these things through shared reference and master data in the end, but with semantic context. And consulting is a good, I think, initial step, because you can quickly see a lot of different communities working on solving actual problems.
Lots of use cases.
Exactly. So huge variety also on different approaches. Every company is dealing with the topic a little bit differently, and you see, as a consultant, you are expected to guide, and you're also guiding, but you're also learning, of course. And so you learn from different approaches, what works well, what works not so well, what are critical things if you want to really change the way of working. There are many topics involved, and you see some companies are more successful than others in this, and that's a good experience you can get in consulting. Because you get also a good network, and that also helped me really start afterwards Acuritz as a spin-off company.
Right. That's a very interesting point you bring up. Like consulting is like that Swiss knife of different job roles and use cases where like you said, we have work with different types of clients who have different requirements. Some are doing it for advanced, like, I don't know, recommendation systems. Some want to just do data integration and absolutely. So I think that's like pretty much excellent. Now I'll move on towards a little bit of more question on like your career journey and strategy, and then we will then jump into Acuritz, like how, what, when, how do you manage all these kind of questions that are like everybody wants to know, because I think that's all. I also have one question about it, about like people being stuck in a particular role while having the ambition, but there's also always like a factor of fear, right? Like there's this uncertainty and all that, but we will get to it. Like, so after working as a consultant, you also climbed the ladder pretty quickly from a consultant to a senior consultant, and then to the head of data governance, right? So and then so you have had the opportunity to work in this kind of consulting roles as well as in the leadership roles. The question essentially is, a lot of people are working in pure tech roles. And then it is kind of an unspoken thing, like if you want to advance in your career, of course you can advance in the technical side, but if you want to create more impact, right? If you want to have a broader vision and you want to run some ideas, you want to execute on a vision, you need to go up the leadership ladder. So how do you manage that switch?
I think the probably several aspects in this. The first thing is already like after a few weeks starting in the consulting role,
right,
I saw that my colleagues can program a lot better than I can.
Right.
Yeah? And on the other hand, I have a good, let's say, conceptualization of maybe how things may work out, or communicating with the customer and so on.
Right.
So that was for me still having the understanding of the implementation part, but others were just a lot better in actual programming. Yeah?
Right.
And so that get me already out of the software engineering part.
Right. Okay.
And then the second thing is you're doing data modeling. And this is the actual intensive work with the customers, because you need to understand the requirements and so on. And that is a really a slow process to get out of that, because you still sometimes need to understand what's the actual use case and dive deep in. And so this is a continuous challenge, and I don't actually have a good answer for that. I'm actually still doing in a certain percentage consulting work,
right? Okay.
Helping in the data strategy, so less on the modeling, but I still sometimes end up in modeling discussions.
Right.
Yeah, and how to model it as a class or as a property. And you can see that that's shouldn't be what I'm doing, and so I'm still sometimes needing to pull out and say no. Others. But on the other hand, it's important to keep the interaction with the people who are actually doing and implementing.
Right.
Because I think important in leadership roles is that you can navigate on these different levels of detail.
Right.
You can dive deep, but you can also abstract. And this is a continuous learning, how good you can do that.
Right.
And improving on that is a continuous learning.
Right. I think you are very well said. So on the technical side, sure, it's like translating those requirements or all that into code or other technical mappings or an architecture, for example, like what needs to be done, but then trying to wrap your head around what actually is needed, what the client or the requirements are, what are they trying to say, what the problem is. So that's, like you said, there are these levels which you need to look through, and there's a lot of strategy also that goes into it, and also like soft skills. And so yeah, but I mean, is that transition easy, and like do you, like, to what extent like does mentorship help in that? Like, is it a skill like the soft skills and all the strategy and vision, can it be learned, or is it something that if you have, you got it. If you got it, if you don't got it, just do engineering or something else.
No. So first of all, I think that learning is always possible. I think that if you want, then you can learn it, and then you can also become good. Of course, for certain things, there's some talent required. I would never have been the great programmer. I understood that, and also the second thing that is related to that is you need to really like what you're doing.
Right.
If you're not getting up and, let's say, not running to work, but if you're not eager for the day to do that work, then you will not be successful.
Right.
So you need to combine this, on the one hand, the learning and, let's say, improving yourself, and on the other hand, finding something that you really like. And if you find that an overlap, then I think these are the cornerstones for any growth.
Right. So that sounds like these are all acquirable skills, right? Because a lot of people, like you said, are very good in the technical part, but when it comes to kind of getting on call with a customer or being more of taking charge of a certain a project or dealing with, let's say, strategies, there's some of the people have the misconception that it cannot be learned, which is surely not the case, like you mentioned, right? Like with the right attitude and finding that right balance between what you like and preparing, like honing the skills for where you want to go, it can be done.
Yes, I definitely believe that it can be done. Though I also want to emphasize that it's not this is the only path. Yeah. So, for example, our CTO, he's not that much in customer interactions, and he likes to be living his genius on the tech side,
right.
and let's say helping our development team implement a good quality software, and so it's really a question what you want, and then going after it with the attitude of I will improve, I will learn, I'm not fearing any mistakes, I'm trying something new, I do a talk at a conference, small things, or I lead a project, but with a sparring partner maybe, and I think then it really depends on everyone to find his path or her path.
No, absolutely. It's not necessary that you have to move to a leadership role. I mean, if you're very happy and if you're like you said, you enjoy it through and through, you can just remain in the technical roles and then still climb up the ladder. And then there's also a certain level of luck, I believe, that is involved, because I mean, I see a lot of talented people, like at least 10, 20 times talented that I am, and only a few of them make it to head of architecture, head of the department, or like even CTO, like you said, right? So there is, of course, like the risk-taking appetite that you have, but then there's also some sort of luck. But definitely, one path goes through the whole tech ladder. The other one goes from like people like me who are interested in, who are doing this, but then also want to jump into something else. So getting into leadership roles, driving more of the strategy. So even data strategy, right? So data strategy was not a role that was before very popular, but now it is a whole. There's also a chief data officer. So yeah, I heard about that the first time when I joined Ostos, and I was completely smitten by the idea that I love graph, I love data, chief data officer, I need to do. But then I'm like, I don't know how to do it. Like,
yeah. Understand, and yes, there's of course some luck involved and so on. What I think benefited me is that I started in a small consulting firm, and the smaller the firm, the more your initiative is appreciated. Right. And the more opportunities you can create on your own, or let's say through the help of close colleagues, because in smaller companies, if they are growing, there's typically not so much fighting for responsibilities. It's more, how can we cover all these different opportunities? And so this is a natural thing that if you take initiative, then you will grow.
No, I think if I'm not wrong, we had something like this, a discussion over a pizza, over lunch, when we were like working together, and I think you gave me a very good advice with respect to that. Like in a smaller company, there's a lot of responsibilities and opportunities, and it's for you to grab. So if you have the hunger, you can always take the leap of faith, reach out to your boss, superior, whoever it is, and ask for more responsibilities, get into more networking, and then land yourself in situations where you can prove, where you can basically test yourself and see whether or not this is something you are up to the metal for, or are you, like this is something you don't want to do. So the only way to find out. But of course, like in big companies, there's a whole bureaucracy ladder, and it takes years and seniority and I don't know what. But so it sounds like a good way to sort of test and climb the ladder as well, like get yourself more exposure to what it takes to become, let's say, the chief data officer. You need to be more with the startup kind of smaller companies, or
I think the smaller companies just give you a lot of opportunities to find your place without having too much politics around, or you call it bureaucracy and politics.
Yes.
So the degree of freedom is bigger in smaller companies, very natural. But of course, maybe that's also with this consulting. I saw both worlds. No?
Right.
So I have some experience of how big corporations work through the consulting, but then as in the consulting firm or now in Acuritz, of course, it's a small company where all kinds of things open up.
Absolutely, that makes sense. So let's move to Acuritz now. That is the startup or the company that you co-founded and are also running right now. And so, So this happened during while you were working with Ostos and all these wonderful use cases that you saw, and I'm sure. So basically the question is, what was that insight, or what gap did you see that you thought that led to the birth of Accurids? Like what was it?
So first of all, I rather call it a spin-off company because together with Thorsten Osthus, who was my previous employer and leaders, we founded Acuritz as a spin-off company from Osthus, from the consulting firm, to focus on software business.
Right.
And the insight was that in our consulting and implementation projects, also this fair data hype came up. And people were interested in fair data, and everybody's saying, yeah, we do fair data and so on.
Right.
But I clearly saw that nobody has really implemented the first of the FAIR principles at enterprise scale. And this is about assigning globally unique, persistent, and resolvable identifiers to all kinds of important data.
Right.
And that there is no commercial solution of enterprise solution on the market. But on the other hand, everybody had a data strategy. So I said, what people talk and how reality is, there's a gap that we can fill with the software.
Right.
And astonishingly, there's still not a other enterprise software solution for persistent identifier management yet. And so we're winning more companies who take their FAIR principles seriously and really set that up on an enterprise scale with us.
And just for the viewers' context, FAIR data is this principle that is FAIR stands for findable, accessible, identifiable, and
interoperable and reusable.
Interoperable and reusable. So absolutely. So that is basically, there's a lot of everybody's gung-ho about using the phrase FAIR data, but not everybody's actually doing it to the full spirit. Just same in the case of 5-star data in terms of RDF. Everybody claimed to have 5-star clean, interconnected, semantified, context-rich data, but when you actually see, it's absolutely a CSV file with so many errors in it, and not even CSV sometimes. Like in one of the projects, we got like a PDF, and they said that, this is like our very clean structured data. And so I get it when you say like something needs to gap. So this is the gap that you basically filled in with
and that we are still filling. That's the interesting thing. And I think overall in the industry and also in pharma, who are really heavily invested in fair data, is that the acronyms were so simple, findable, accessible, and so people stop there and thinking, okay, that makes sense, understandable, and so let's do that. Mm-hmm. But they were not going and actually reading that original paper and looking at what are the criteria.
Right.
And that again, the fair metrics and so on, this was becoming more an academic topic again.
Yeah.
And in the industry, of course, you need to be a lot more pragmatic and less idealistic, and only what goes into operations and production counts.
Yeah.
Everything else is learning and invest without return. So that mindset, I think, helped us also a lot in our approach to fair implementation. That only what works counts.
Yeah, that is very crucial that you mentioned it. That in industry, it is all decisions are driven by throughput, revenue. Is this either going to help us cut costs, or is it bringing in more revenue? Is it saving us money, or is it bringing more cash, or more productivity even, or efficiency? But of course, in academia, it's a different story. Like there is a whole sort of also ideological, but also research oriented, where it's more about can we find the new best cutting edge thing, and not so much focus on like whether or not it's gonna be reusable after a point, or is somebody going to maintain it? Is it going to be adopted and have like a practical impact? So that is also some of the stuff also gets lost in translation, because some of these ideas like fair data and RDF, for example, knowledge graphs are really good, but then there's also some problem that I have seen that there are clear use cases where knowledge graphs and fair data and RDF is very useful, but then there's also a problem coming from the so-called middle people in the industry, sometimes even sadly consultants, where we try to try and open a peanut with a sledgehammer. Like not everything needs knowledge graphs, but then it's kind of a yo-yo kind of thing where you earn the trust by implementing some use cases and really helping the industry. Like you see, if you have this data cleaned up, if you have it tagged, enriched, you can directly do a bunch of things, machine learning, data science, you can do whatever you want with it, right? Now you can build LLMs and whatnot, but then there are also some use cases which are just like, there's not that much, bang for the buck you're gonna get, and people are also trying to sell these technologies there, and that kind of also becomes a little bit of, like rough ride. So, but I have also been on both sides of the table, but yeah, definitely there are really some good ideas like fair data and knowledge graphs and ontologies to some extent, but yeah, I mean, I also feel sad sometimes, like, people are trying to shove the ideas everywhere. So right from the early days of inception of Acuritz to growing it and running it to the level where it is now, like what were your early kind of product and team decisions that paid off? What kind of growth did you go for, like that Facebook, Zuckerberg like hackathon that we build something quick and ship it and get customers, or was it more methodical? And like since you said there was also support from Thorsten, who was already running, I think, a bunch of companies and spin-offs. So.
Yeah, I think that of course. I don't know whether I would have ever founded a company if I wouldn't have experienced this ecosystem that Thorsten brought up here with the consulting and then spin-off companies that really motivated that I can also do it,
right?
Yeah, and make that step in a safe atmosphere, because really started this out of the consulting. So for 2 years, I was just doing a regular consulting job, and on the side, we started Acuritz as a spin-off company. And then the
so
crucial
was it
point.
You then working?
No, actually, also for example, Daniel Müller, who's now our CTO.
Right from the beginning,
mostly from the beginning, he wrote an MVP and so on. Made a first demonstration that time with Bayer, and then in the end, what really also helped us position this idea within the company, in the consulting company, as something to invest in.
So it's like you build something useful on the side along with your job, and then you also pitched it to, you saw some use case, and then you pitched it to one of the clients just as a proof, like a test, whether or not this is going to work out.
So
they bought it.
So we actually pitched the idea, of course, before we even had written any line of code. Right. We just had the idea, and this was the good thing, that with in the consulting, you can talk to many different people and think, do you think that is a gap that would be worth filling? And then many people say yes. But you know that it's worth filling if people pay.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that was basically also criteria for us to really start Acuritz, was commitments from Bayer and AstraZeneca at that early time, that trusted us and basically said yes, if you push that through, then we'll buy, and they also gave us some initial funding to develop an MVP version, which is still our let's say our mindset, that we do co-development and ask customers for what are the priorities for making Acuritz more useful in their organization, and take that seriously.
Right. I think you already also answered my next question, which was like, what was that one process or sort of framework that was game changing for Acuritz ability to ship and scale the product? So one of them is clearly like the trust of the customer, but then you were also able to quickly build and scale it to the enterprise level, or did you also face any kind of other challenges with respect to team, with respect to like other things?
Yeah, with the team we're quite stable. So the CTO is there from the beginning. A colleague who did this master thesis about distributed persistent identifiers is still with us, is now head of operations, and so with the team we have quite some stable, and we're looking for long-term relationships in that, especially for a product company. That's important to keep the let's say keep a stable team that builds the experience and builds the knowledge, and that you don't have much fluctuation.
Right.
And I think the other thing was that we heavily invested in this open source initiative for the ISO IDMP topic, which at the beginning is just investment. You're contributing to improving a standard or helping many different pharma to standardize their data. But that also turned out to be a good investment. But again, it's long reaching. We started that 40 years ago, and now we are having very large companies hiring us and the product to standardize their product data across all functions. And but also there, we knew the people already for 5 years or more that now said, okay, let's make a project.
Right. I want to move more into now moving from the processes and what it took, and like what was it about, like how did you set up Acuritz. Also now let's get to the belly of the beast, which is managing people and also the expectations, the politics and everything. So of course, as much as the business itself, the idea and the cash runway is important, the other side of the coin is also being able to find good team members, build an excellent large organization style cross-domain team, and then managing that team. So I have a couple of questions here. So one of them is, what was your biggest lesson in kind of building and leading teams within like the scope of Acuritz? Because you started small, right? You said that you did this on the side with a few other interested people, and then now that was like 2-3 people, and now how large is Acuritz like currently?
Yeah, so actually we were quite long for the initial time, not growing that much, and but since last year we actually going above, and so end of last year we were about 10-11 FTE. Right now we are more than 20 FTE already, and right now plan also to be at about 30, 35 towards the end of the year. I don't have the one formula for success, but I read quite a lot of books on entrepreneurship, and some things resonate, and I think one important thing that is that message that resonated with me and that we take also as a principle is that we take care of the people, the product, and the product in that order. Because if you don't have the good people, you will not build a good product. Absolutely. And you will not make any profit. So, and that is the underlying guiding thing. What can we do so that the match between the responsibilities or things that we need to do and the genius of the different people, how can we find the best fit? So that the people are inspired, feel they have impact, and grow. And I think that's the fundamental thing that we try to follow, and that help to be good. And also in product decisions, we are rather taking it's a little bit slower, but delivering the right quality than shipping too fast. This is, let's say, of course, we also need to be fast to get fast feedback. But of course, in a pharma environment where you also computer validation system. So one of our customers uses Acuritz in a GXP environment where there's heavy documentation around the product. So for example, we can't, even if we would want, we can't deploy more often than twice a year.
Right.
A new version. So you better get that version right, and not say, oh, now I need to deploy a hotfix, which would again say so much documentation effort that everything is going right, and you also lose the trust. And as a data registry, it's kind of the stability and performance is the trust that we need to deliver with that, and
So it's built around the lines of obsession with the product and getting it right, which is something similar to what I also read and also kind of heard about Jeff Bezos. Like when he started off Amazon, he had this fanatic obsession about the user experience. Like nothing else matters. He also started like with just a door as a desk and like minimum infrastructure, and he had this obsession. Even if let's say the stock's doing bad, as long as the customers are happy, as long as the product that they've built is serving the will of the people, he would continue to invest and grow and absolutely. So my next question is on your philosophy at Acuritz on hiring. So is there something specific you look for in people for like high impact or data or product team, or like what does the hiring philosophy at Acuritz look like?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that we hire slow.
Okay.
Because hiring mistakes are the most devastating ones.
Right.
Yeah. You invest
in terms of cost, or
you invest a lot of time in an onboarding or training at the beginning and so on,
right.
and you also build, of course, some kind of relationship with that. So if it doesn't work out, then removing an employee again is not a pleasant, or let's say not a good thing, and also the investment is gone.
Right.
So we always try very transparent at the beginning to assess, is this really a good fit for you and for us, so that your genius and our needs have a great overlap.
The perfect wedding.
In the end, and you can be just more and more transparent, right. Because in the end, it's not good for us and it's not good for the employee if we later find out that it's not a good fit. Yeah. And so that's the one very important thing. The next thing is that we look for a learning mindset, because all the semantics thing, all the data standardization things and so on, These are all not rocket science. Everybody can learn that. Yeah? But you need to have a willingness to explore and learn and continuously do that. Also learn about certain areas, maybe in chemistry or biology, so that you can speak with the customer on use cases like target identification or patient safety use cases. So whatever it is, you need to have a mindset of being curious and improving yourself and learning. That almost comes at Acuritz like a responsibility, that you develop yourself further. And it's your responsibility. We support that, but ultimately you are responsible for your growth.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Personal development, fitting the needs, the culture, and also an agile mind. Because this is something also what I had to go through, not at Acuritz, but at Oslos, because I moved from a pure semantics background, and then I plunged into life sciences, and exactly like you said. So you have to get your hands dirty, understand. I mean, you don't need to become a domain expert. There will always be, like the clinical scientists who are going to guide you, but you need to understand the domain enough so you can have a conversation with them and understand, translate their lingua franca into your requirements, and then turn it into something technical. And so definitely, so that's great. Yeah, we discussed graph data, then to data registry, to fair data, to ontologies now, and I have a few questions on what's happening in the current context, like AI, LLMs, and the role of semantics, knowledge graphs, and ontologies, and also how Acuritz, or whether or not you're also kind of jumping into the LLM domain. So
yeah, of course, it is a total shift in the industry overall, and how we work with data, how we interact with data, and so you can't ignore that, because we really need to get also there on the embracing mindset. It can help definitely in many different topics, like terminology matchings, faster data standardization, guided data standardization.
Right.
Yeah, if you always have the fixed target data model, like in the ISO standards, AI should be really powerful to streamline the pressing the data into these forms, or identifying quality issues and so on, and or fixing quality issues, suggesting fixes for quality issues. And so it definitely has an important role, and as I think also other companies, we of course jumped on that. Actually, our CTO is quite into these topics, and it also was demonstrating me something with GPT-2 or GPT in the early versions, and saying, here, that this can do create a UI design or something. It can program and all of these initial things. Before the OpenAI ChatGPT thing came through. And so he was also developing, for example, agent approaches and so on. And it will be the differentiating thing as we go forward.
Right.
To which extent you can combine the knowledge graph and more logical semantics with the LLMs and the power of the mass of the data. Yeah? So this is you can't ignore the one or the other.
Right.
You need to find a way of how you can bring this together to speed up processes, to enable our users to be more effective in standardizing and utilizing the data.
Right. So that already, I think with the whole, now there's also this agentic AI, right, where you have these agents that you can individually give tasks to. And when it comes to a daunting application or a problem like enterprise data standards, where, like you mentioned, that these individual companies are already using them, but it's locally developed and it's only relevant for their particular use case. But then I think, do you also think like this agentic AI and LLMs will also have an important role to streamline, like you said, to play a role in this enterprise-wide data standardization, right?
Definitely, and we actually already implement the MCP standard, so that other AIs can look intelligently into the registry to find out, for example, which systems manages the material IDs, how many materials do we have, give me the list of materials, what are the metadata, and Acuritz, since we are collecting all the IDs and doing the deduplication and the linking, with just a little bit of metadata that we need for identifying relationships or identifying duplicates, this already is so rich of a metadata that you can answer many important questions like, can I ship a certain product into a certain country? Or what happens if there's a shortage in one country? Do we have alternative products that we could ship into that country? And so on and so on. So the many important questions can be already answered with just metadata, in the sense of, let's say, give me the list of things and how are they related, without, let's say, big documents and all this big data behind. So, just the metadata is quite.
That is actually an excellent point, because like in the whole AI and LLM industry now, I think also a lot of companies are paying heed to like knowledge graphs, and how knowledge graph as a knowledge base or a model in itself is already well linked, contextualized, metadata rich 5-star level data, which you can just feed into your language model, and that's like cuts your effort in half. And then like that's less work the model has to do, and then you can already bring in other kinds of knowledge graphs and then answer complex questions on top of it.
So we don't use the LLM to actually answer the questions. We use it to navigate in the connected data network and find the facts to come up with an answer. And yes, then how you phrase the answer is something, again, the LLM does. But let's say the facts that are expressed in the answers coming from the knowledge graph, of course. And but the interaction with the knowledge graph, and nobody or you can't ask a larger group of people to write Sparkle queries. You want natural interaction. People, and probably this will be in the next generation even more, people will just want to communicate in their natural language, and everything else is handled by the machine.
One of the use cases that I was also at some point working on was there's a lot of these, like you said, documentation, hundreds and if not 1,000 pages of documentation, and then how do you train new people on this documentation? Because frankly speaking, nobody has the time. Nobody wants to look at text all day and be bored. So one of the use cases was sort of like you bring all this documentation in, you enrich it, convert it into a knowledge graph if you want. But now I think you don't even have to do that. LLMs will pretty much you can input, train it on whatever data, and then you use that as a chatbot or a mentor of sorts, and then you can ask questions and you can tell it to train you on certain modules, prepare modules for you, and then that cuts the effort in half, and also is more kind of interactive education is much better than you just looking at the screen. So
I understand. Makes sense.
So but a chatbot of sorts, but still more useful than like a generalized chatbot. When we talk about LLM AI, there's a lot of also misconception or let's say fear in people, like, oh my God, now if LLM is going to build an ontology, me as a data modeler or an ontologist, I am going to be out of job. So like in a world increasingly driven by AI, what do you think is the role of the human curated ontologies, and like is still human intervention or effort still going to be relevant in 5 years or maybe less now? Everybody is, because people said that this is going to happen by 2040. Now we have GPT-03 and whatnot, and agentic workflows, which are pretty much building, all you have to tell them is build me a task, like a sticky note kind of app with so-and-so, and give it just a drawing, and it will churn out code, deploy it using Replit, and then just start making money right off the hook. Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, interesting question. And my first thought is that when I look into the pharma industry, it's all but not about building more ontologies. What we did with the ISO standards is we basically just took the ISO standards and derive the ontology from that. But we didn't invent a new model,
right,
or we didn't invent a new standard or something. We just said, okay, ISO is good at standardization, and they have described all the model already.
right.
We just need to digitalize it so that we then can tackle the actual problem of the standardization of the data and getting more quality data to answer more complex questions that we need to answer more effectively in the current world. There's a lot of discussion around the supply chain, that you have resilience in a changing world where you need to be more flexible. You need to shift things more flexibly, and so you need to answer questions, all kinds of things that combine data from many different places, and so it's really about improving the quality so that data is fit for answering these questions. Of course, then again with LLMs, but this is the big task. Now the role of the ontologist and maybe the currently the data modeler, I think is still very useful in understanding the actual problem and what's the relevancy of certain aspects of a data model, and where to prioritize in the standardization, what is good enough on data quality, and focusing on solving the important problems and actually pushing through it. Because I mean, if you look at this and say, we have so long bothered that the data quality is so bad, and it takes so many people and nobody gets
so much money,
big impact. Now we finally have a magic wand that can help us eliminate some of the boring work.
Absolutely.
So we just need to embrace it and propel us forward. I really see this LLM thing more as something to reduce the boring and labor-intensive work than the high-end intellectual or decision making and prioritization and change management topics and really solving the problems. They solve defined problems, but they still, I would say, quite some step away from solving the problems more holistically. Broader, that's one thing, I think that's my main view. But you don't know that it's quite an open new chapter that has opened, and so I think we all need to be curious, but welcoming. I think is important.
No, I'm very glad you said it, and I have like 2 points on it. Absolutely, we don't need more standards, but there's also this meme on XKCD. There are like 25 standards, and somebody's like, this is still not fitting my purpose, and somebody else comes in like, here, 26 standards. So that, and definitely, I also have the same take as you have. I mean, I read a quote. I'm not sure where it was from, or even like if or not that was a quote or something, but I read it somewhere that a person, like let's say an engineer using AI or GPT is going to replace an engineer who doesn't use GPT, because it just brings in so much pure productivity to your work. Yes. And like you said, cleaning data, integrating data, verifying, if that's a term, data takes so much money and effort that industries are so reluctant, because it is very hard to convince the stakeholders and business people of the impact that this will have, because they have to spend so much money. And now for once, like you said, there's this magic wand that it costs, I don't know, 1/10, 1/12, maybe less of the cost. And now for once you can get rid of all the low level problems. And I also think that no, probably not. AI probably is not going to replace, because I mean, I think we are training all these systems on explicit information, right? Like tons and tons of information. But then there's like when we operate as certain experts or roles or humans, there's some implicit knowledge. There's wisdom and there's some nuances that come with that AI cannot pick up until probably it can learn to like think on its own artwork, or have freedom of expression of some sorts.
Yeah.
Sorry, you want to?
Yeah, I think the good thing is that this semantic vision of contextualized linked data, that machines can really work at scale across organizations and so on. This before was more a unrealistic ambition, is now becoming a realistic goal that we can pursue. And so I think that we for the first time actually have a chance to scale the standardization and the integration efforts. But on the other hand, the world is changing faster and faster. The application lifecycle is getting shorter. So we need to rewire and rewire, which again is an argument for standardization, because you then can rely on certain shared structures. And that in the end is one of the biggest things of the semantics, is that you create a shared data language so that different people can have their perspective, but understand each other through that shared language, through standardization. And so it's an exciting time, because things that were more niche, I have now the chance to really shape and become mainstream.
Absolutely. Perfect. I think that brings us towards the end of our journey. If you had to start all over again, would you do everything the same way, or is that something you would like to change with Acuritz?
Yeah, there are a lot of things, of course, one would do differently.
If you can mention a few, or also why.
Yeah, very, very difficult question, but I mean that you have a lot of things that you would need to worry about at the beginning. It's like legal things, where a lot of things we luckily benefited from this spin-off situation, that we had corresponding HR department, legal department, and so on, that helped us do the initial steps, because you can't hire an HR person, you can't hire a legal person, and so on, and that's very, very difficult at the beginning, to not make too many big mistakes.
So that you wouldn't change, like having that
the spin-off, but it's let's say if you're doing an actual startup, then you probably can exchange with an incubator, or somehow tap into shared resources or externals also. So that's important. I think the other thing I think we could even further strengthen on getting the customer problem fully understood again and again, and not coming too much with, I think I have a great idea that I want to now say. It's about really understanding the problem. And one can't emphasize this enough, but that is important, and that really changed also in Acuritz when we hired our first person who has not a tech background but a pharma background. It came quite late, because we never had enough money to hire someone from Pharma. But then a lucky situation was there that we could actually win a very, very talented person who had that insight into the pharma world with more than 10 years of experience. And so that really helped also position us and then get into a different dialogue with the customers. And that is something we should have done a lot earlier.
That's excellent advice, actually. Thank you very much for giving us the time.
Thank you, Harsh.
Very happy that you could arrange our session on such a short notice. Really grateful. And I'm sure a lot of people, of viewers, who are basically more people like me, who are ambitious and kind of it's always kind of very helpful to get information and knowledge from people who have already made it. So there's hope, there's faith, and we can keep going. So thanks a lot.